Thank you. Okay, man, how's everybody? Good, great, wonderful. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's Super Sunday, and I, for one, couldn't be more excited. I'm a 40-year-old kid, as many of you know, so I love this theme that we're using. I love it when a new superhero movie comes out and me and the boys and we'll drag their mama along to watch it with us. There are certain cartoons that they know not to watch without dad. We love the whole thing. In fact, I threatened when I figured out the theme, when we figured out what we're doing for this next 2 weeks, was that I was like, well, I got some tights. I mean, I can don some tights. I mean, I can do it. You know, and I was told, literally, well, your credibility might be shot. And so we don't know if they can hear anything else you say after they see you like that. So all I'm going to say is I'm not preaching next week, so you've been warned. You've been warned. If you didn't need another reason to come back to church, that's it for next week. We believe here at Village that we have a certain DNA. We have characteristics as a church. And in fact, if you're new here, you can actually find them on the wall right outside here, that we aspire to, we believe, we try to be three specific things. One, that we want to be a safe place for folks, that when they walk in this building, that they feel safe. They feel like they can be themselves. They can come in with whatever baggage you may be carrying, whatever past experience you may have had, that this is a safe place. And we say that we are guided by grace and we're growing in truth. That we're always going to lead with grace, just as God has done with us. And that together we'll journey along into the truth. The third one, and we'll come back to the second one, the third one is that we want to be a people who live love. That we want to live love everywhere we go. Right here in these walls, we want to live love at work, at home, with the family. We want to live love in the checkout aisle at Ingles. We want to live love in summer traffic here up in the mountains. Is anyone ready for the summer folks to go home? Can we say that in church? I don't know if we can. Tell you a story the other day. So in Hiawassee, we live in Hiawassee, and so this past week they had a car show, right, going on in Hiawassee. Well, me and Jonas were coming out here Thursday morning, and we got stuck in the car parade, right? And so we're just sitting there and just sitting there and sitting there and sitting there, and then all of a sudden I see like today's cars. How would you say that? Not vintage cars. They're like cars for today, you know. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I can go. Nope. So I start driving, and all of a sudden here comes some more vintage cars, and I have a dude waving at me, telling me where I can go because I'm interrupting the parade. So I was trying to live love in the vintage car parade. But that's what we want to do. We want to live love everywhere we go, just as Jesus has done for us, we want to do for others. Finally, we also want to be a people who are better together, that whatever you can do, we can do better, right? We can do better. The we is greater than I. It's terrible English, but it's great in practice. That we is greater than I. That whenever, and we believe this so much, that whenever we have a decision to be made, we form a team. Whenever we want to serve together, we serve together in teams. Whenever we want to connect our lives together and grow together, we get in groups. We are better together because there's this unique momentum that happens, isn't there, when we serve together, when we lead, when we work, when we teach, when we're all on the same page. There's this unique momentum. You see it in sports. You see it, maybe it's your job. You see it, I love watching my kids play sports, and you can see it when a team comes together. You can also see when a team is not together, right? You just see it, right? You see it. We're better together, this unique momentum. And each week here at Village, there are, and many of you are sitting here this week because you were on last week. There's this team of volunteers that do incredible work week in and week out here at Village. And we don't have favorites around here, all right? We don't have favorites. But if we did, the favorites that we would have would be our fantastic, super heroic volunteers who serve on teams every week, that show up to get you parked, that show up to help you get coffee, to make you feel welcome, that show up to hold your babies, to wipe your babies' behinds, that show up to watch your toddlers, that show up to hang out with your kids and lead them in small groups, that hang out to and eat endless amounts of pizza with your teenagers. There are folks in this room and around this church who do an incredible job. We couldn't be Village without you. We couldn't. We've said it a couple of months ago, you are our secret sauce. Our folks are our secret sauce. And maybe you're familiar with the 80-20 principle, right? The 80-20 principle is there's always 20% of the people doing 80% of the work. I've heard this. I've been ministering in churches for 20 years now, and it always seemed that way. Can I tell you, you are the anomaly. You are weird. You are peculiar. You are strange. It's not 80-20 around here. You are cutting edge, over and above, right? You are blowing that principle out of the water. We love our teams. We love our volunteers. But we know that God is always calling us to push and to grow and to get bigger and to get better and to reach more people, right? And we need more folks to help us do that. So over the next 2 weeks, we want to invite you to help us make something huge happen, right? Something greater than ourselves happen. Something that can change a life. Something that can change a community. Something that can change our world. We want to invite you to be a voice in the lives of the next generation here at Village. I want you to think about it this way. So we use a group called Orange who does our curriculum. These folks are leading the way in how to minister to families and children. We are so excited that we get to use their material. And Orange has broken down each year that we have parents as influence in our kids' lives. That there's 18 of those years, right, till 18, and they call those phases, right? So there's 18 phases. And within those phases, there are 52 weeks, right? 52 weeks. 52 opportunities each phase to relay to that child that they are loved both by us and by God. Now, maybe you're sitting there and you hear the 18, you're trying to multiply 52 by 18. I'm not going to do it because I'm terrible at math, okay? But that seems like a lot, doesn't it? It seems like a lot. And while, yeah, it does seem like a lot, can I remind you that it's July 15th in the year 2018? Who sneezed and we missed the first 6 months? Didn't it seem like yesterday we were having Jingle Jam? It snowed and it was the big weekend. What in the world? This time is flying by, and we have 52 chances a year to influence, to care for our babies, kids, middle schoolers, and teenagers. And we have this incredible opportunity before us. And just to tell you where we're going today, you have a card in your seat, or maybe you've moved it to the seat next to you, right? At the end of this today, I'm going to invite you to take that card, to fill it out. And as you walk out of here, there'll be some guest services folks waiting for you. And if you are not serving on one of our kids teams, our Village kids teams, a nursery, toddlers, First Look, we're going to invite you to do that, right? And you'll place that card. They'll have a save the date magnet for you if you're not on board yet, serving on one of those teams that they'll hand to you. Maybe you're sitting here like, I have some more questions. The guy up front didn't do a whole lot of explaining. Well, that's great. There'll be some folks out there to answer your questions too. You can find them as you walk straight ahead. There'll be a big wall with superheroes. It's a blue wall. It looks like a cityscape. It's pretty cool out there. And by the way, there's volunteers' heads on superheroes, which is fantastic. Some of them are very well placed. I'll say that. I'll let you figure out who needs to be where and how they are. But that's what we're leaning towards today, is to encourage you, to encourage the next generation sitting right here in our midst. And it's with this kind of thought taking place, and I want us to look at an Old Testament story. And it's one that if you've hung out here at Village for any time at all, you've probably heard us preach through, and that's the book of Nehemiah, right? And here's why we keep going back to Nehemiah, because it has this way of being very prescriptive in how we go about being the church in the 21st century American context that we are. So over and over again, we will go back and look at, unapologetically, and look at Nehemiah. Don't you know how sometimes you'll read something and then you'll read it maybe 100 times. And then like that 101st time, it just sticks out to you? The Bible's crazy like that. You need to read your Bibles because that happens to me quite often. You'll read it and you read it and all of a sudden, boom, something will just explode off the page for you. And if you've been in church for any stretch or period of time, you'll know kind of the backstory of Nehemiah, that his hometown, Jerusalem, is in shambles. It has been ransacked by a conquering nation. And the community of faith, the community period, is struggling, right? They're struggling. And they're facing this crisis of faith, and they're facing an unpredictable future. And I don't know about you, but I like having some idea about what's coming next, right? I like it when my A leads to a B, and then my B leads to a C, then C to D. I like having some idea of what's coming next, but these folks have no idea what is going to happen next in their lives. And there were probably a couple things true about these folks living in Jerusalem, this sacked city by this conquering nation. Probably some things that were true about them living in the 5th century BC. And one was this. Either they had lived in those conditions for so long that they didn't see how bad things were, right? They lived in it for so long, they didn't see how bad it was. Or secondly, they lived in those conditions so long that they couldn't imagine them ever getting any better, right? They lived in it for so long, they couldn't even begin to imagine things getting better. And that can happen to us, can it? Right? We can see things that way. We look around at the conditions that have existed for generations. We just chalk it up to, well, that's how it is. It's the way it goes. That's what it's like. This is never going to change. It's never going to get better. I do this, maybe you do it too, on a small scale every day. You know, like you've been meaning to clean the house, right? And just meaning to. And then things just kind of pile up, and it's like, this house won't ever get clean. True story. So the missus went with my oldest son, Lane, to the mission trip this past week. So me and Jonas have been daddy-sonning it this week. And so I had these grand plans about getting all this stuff done that when my wife came home, she'd be like, you are a super heroic husband. All right. So last night I was going to vacuum and mop so the whole house would be clean there on the main level and everything would be good. So I start vacuuming, and we have a central vac in the house, and lo and behold, the thing just quits working. And so I sent her the text. So here's the deal. I was planning on being super heroic, but my superhero tool has failed me, so the house isn't clean. Ta-da! It was painful to send it. I mean, it was a kryptonite text I sent to my wife. But so now I'm sitting here looking at the house like the house is never going to get clean. The vac is never going to get clean. It can't mop, can't vacuum. Anybody have a vacuum I can borrow? No, just kidding. Maybe you feel it with dieting, right? Like the diet will never take, right? Like I've tried and I've tried and I've tried. It just won't. This is just how things are going to be. It's just how things are. Maybe you're like that with your car, right? With your car. Hey, it's in the car. Where? I don't know. I can't see it. It's under all this stuff. Maybe, have you moved recently? Folks that move, if you've moved, if you're a veteran of moving, you know, you have all the boxes, and it's this big deal you go through, and then you move, and then there's all those boxes you now get to unpack, right? I have a friend that they turn one of their rooms in their house into the box room. Right, it was supposed to be like a kid's room, but now it's all the boxes that they just get around to unpacking. So that's what will things ever change? So what do we do when those happens? We just give up. Right? It's easier to just give up. Right? We stop imagining. We stop dreaming. And I can only imagine that was what was going on in the 5th century BC in Jerusalem. That's the setting for the story of Nehemiah. And what we learn through his journey of restoring and rebuilding is timeless, and there's so many levels. Because on the one hand, on the surface, Nehemiah's story reaffirms this idea that we are better together, that anything you can do, we can do better. But it's also an indicator of something more critical, and I love this part of this story, because it implies that when we do something together, it has the potential to affect how a whole generation can see God. See, there's a generation sitting in the ruins of Jerusalem. A generation probably becoming disillusioned with their parents' and their grandparents' version of God. I imagine those kids and those teenagers sitting there, and they're tired. They're growing tired of hearing these stories about how great and how good God is when all they see when they look around is destruction and despair. Think about it. Think about it. If you're a 13-year-old in that town, adults, we can get there. We're just grown-up teenagers, right? You can remember being 13. You're 13. And you're probably getting a little skeptical every time you go to Saturday school, right? Not Sunday school, because Sabbath was on Saturday, right? You're getting a little skeptical. And I can imagine a 13-year-old, smart 13-year-old, okay, smart aleck 13-year-old. Not that I know any of those, or was one, still am. Sitting there and saying, wait a minute, Mr. Saturday school teacher. Wait a minute. You're telling me Joshua, right, could blow a trumpet and these walls fall. Moses could lift his staff and a sea parts. David takes a rock, hits a giant in the head, and he dies, and everybody's set free. Then why can't we fix what's broken in our community? You're telling me all this happened, yet this can't get fixed. What is going on? If God is so amazing and so great, and he gave these other people the power to help his people, why can't he do the same for us? Can you imagine being there? Having these questions, trying to figure out what's going on? I'm guessing for the teenagers in that town, that feeling like God wasn't with them the way he was with those in the past, I imagine that they probably started losing respect for the faith of their parents and their leaders. And the next thing you know, a son's telling his dad, hey, Dad, so I don't think I want to go to temple this week. We're going out like camel hunting, or I don't know, whatever we did back in the day, right? We'll do something. Anything is better than that. I don't think I'm going to do that. Dad, in Passover this year, I know the family gets together, but I think I'm just going to pass over that this year. Get it, Dad? That was great. I think I'm not going to go. I don't want to be there. I don't think I'm going to do it. And you know, my lamb, we have the sacrifice each year. Well, I've grown kind of fond of Mr. Jingles this year. I don't think I'm going to sacrifice him. I don't think I'm going to do that. And this is another reason why this story is so important for you and for me. Because just in Nehemiah's time, do your best to imagine, we could very well have a generation who is skeptical about the church. Just like in Nehemiah's time. In fact, I wonder if maybe it's not worse. That we have a generation sitting here looking at us saying, tell me about this God. Show me this God. What's he like? They hear us talk about the goodness and the power of Christ, but they don't see us doing very much. And that's where we can take a page out of Nehemiah's book here. You see, the thing I love about Nehemiah, he was a guy who got things done. To quote Larry the Cable Guy, he was a getter-doner, right? He would get it done. He would make it happen. And we have a generation in need of Nehemiahs, right? In need of Nehemiahs. People who are going to stop talking about what needs to be done and start putting action to what needs to be done. Because if all we do is sit around and talk about what needs to be done, congratulations, we're politicians. And nobody likes them. I'm sorry, their mamas do. And some of us do too. We need to put action to our words so we can learn lessons from Nehemiah's story, all right? And a few of them in particular today I want us to talk about in the next little bit. And the first one's this, that we can start naming what's broken, right? It's okay. We can start naming what is broken. The story of Nehemiah starts with him serving the Persian king Artaxerxes in Susa. And we're going to kind of just take Nehemiah 1 and walk through it a little bit. We'll lean in on a couple of verses. But he's serving King Artaxerxes there in Susa, and a messenger shows up and tells him the terrible news about his hometown. And verse 3 of chapter 1, this is what the messenger says. Those who survived the exile, those who survived this country, this nation coming in and ransacking the town, carrying off half the group, those who survived are back in the province and in great trouble and disgrace. Now, it's one thing to be in great trouble, right? I mean, we get trouble. Like, nobody wants trouble. But that disgrace word's huge there, because to be disgraced is to be a whole nother level of dealing with stuff. That's to have no worth, to have no sense of self, to have no purpose, no meaning. They're in disgrace. There's nothing for them. We know we love grace, right? You take this and put it onto grace. That's what they are. They're without grace. They're without grace. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates have been burned with fire. The town is in ruins. The walls and gates are broken down in multiple places. right? The town is in ruins. So Nehemiah hears this. Right? He hears this message from this messenger. And his first response is to mourn, to fast, and to pray. Right? Immediately he decides for several days he's just going to sit with this knowledge. Right? Just to sit on it and to meditate on it, to contemplate, to think about what's going on in his hometown. But after several days, he jumps into action. And we're going to get into that in just a second, what he did. But Nehemiah is showing us something important here with the time he spent in mourning. And that's this, that if we can't name the problem, then we can't fix the problem. Right? If we can't name the problem, then we can't fix the problem. This is why I love mechanics. I love my mechanic, right? Because I know virtually nothing about automobiles. I know how to turn the radio on and the air conditioning on, right? What else do you need to know? And start it. But when I go to my mechanic and I'm like, yeah, it's going, right? When I tell him that, he's like, okay, well, let me see. That was, right? That's what it's doing. Then what I want him to do is to figure out what's wrong, right? And for the most part, he does. He's fantastic. He names the problem, and then he fixes the problem. I can't even name the problem, right? But he names it and fixes it. And sometimes we need to assess a situation and be honest about what's broken. Nehemiah becomes aware that his hometown is in trouble, that people are vulnerable in so many ways. Their safety is threatened. Right, they're at the mercy of whatever other conquering nation might want to come in and take them on. They're living every day in fear of how they're going to survive. And so Nehemiah prays to God, prays that he recognizes that the current reality is not what God had promised his people. He has a wake-up call. Every once in a while, you and I can use wake-up calls, can't we? Right? We get them sometimes in the form of our health. We get them sometimes in the form of our kids asking a question that just shakes our world. We get them in the forms of, something happened in our family, something happened in our relationships. Every once in a while, we need a wake-up call because it is so easy to get comfortable, isn't it? Man, I love comfort. Comfort is incredible, but it's so easy to get there in our own community that we don't even know what's going on around us, do we? We live in our own little comfort bubble. We don't know what else is going on. And it's easy for us to be uninformed about what's happening to other people when it's not happening to us, right? I don't know what y'all are talking about. It's good for me. Right? It's bad. I don't get that, right? We play that card. It's so easy to not know what's happening around us when it's not happening to us. But then every once in a while we have a wake-up call. We get some disturbing news. They are getting divorced, right? They are in trouble. Their kids aren't doing well. Right? We have these wake-up calls. And it's then what we do with that information that determines our character, isn't it? Right? We hear this like, okay, what do? Do I just ignore it? Or do I get involved? And I want to make a suggestion this morning. And you don't have to agree. You don't have to agree. But I think that if we, as a church, ignore the problems that are happening in our community, we forfeit our right to have influence in the community. And I'll say that again. If we ignore the problems that are happening in our community, we forfeit our right to have influence in our community. When we ignore what's broken around us, we forfeit our credibility with those who know we should know better. 21st century American church, is there not a more fitting understanding of what's going on with generations below us right now? Right? When they see us, many times ignoring the problems around us, forfeiting our credibility. And here's what can happen if we continue to do this. We may have influence with one another, right? We love each other. It's good to be together. But we won't have influence with our community, right? They'll look at us and be like, oh, what a great club of folks over there. I have seen this at churches for years. Churches that have given away their opportunity to be an influence in the community because they love Bob's Sunday school class, right? And Bob's Sunday school class is 200 strong, man, but they're not doing slap anything outside of the walls of that room, right? It's a sad place to be. It's a tough place to get. And here's the deal. We don't have influence because we're right. Right? Sometimes we can get guilty of thinking, well, we got the right answers. People just come to us. That's not how we get influence. We have influence when we care, don't we? My kids don't come to me asking questions about things going on at school or with sports, or we're not quite there with the girls yet, but I'm sure one day maybe they'll go to their mother for those questions. They don't come to me because they think I'm right. They know quite otherwise. They come to me because they know I care, right? They know I care about them. We don't have influence with our community because we're right about what we believe. We have influence with our community when we treat them well. That's how we do it. We need to start naming what's broken. We can't start changing what's broken if we can't name it. We're in need of a wake-up call. And for our students and kids that are dealing with absentee parents, drug culture, bullying, pain, fear, hurt, man, it's easy to look the other way, isn't it? But we don't need to. We need a wake-up call. And Nehemiah doesn't ignore what's broken. He doesn't excuse it. He doesn't sit back and wait for a miracle. Have you ever found yourself there just sitting and waiting, right? Nehemiah doesn't do that. It's okay to expect a miracle. Don't hear me saying that. It's okay to expect a miracle, but it's not okay to just sit there and wait for one. And Nehemiah doesn't. He jumps into action. He doesn't wait for God to tell him what to do. I love that. Sometimes we can feel that, like, well, God hadn't told me what to do that yet. Well, maybe he has encouraged you to love one another. There's always that. He didn't wait for a miracle. He apologizes to God on behalf of the people. He reminds God of his promises to the nation. Then his prayer almost sounds like he's panicked. Maybe you've prayed this prayer before, because he knows what he's going to do. It's like he's saying, please help me, God, because here I go. You ever prayed that prayer before? All right, God, I don't know what's coming, but I'm driving over there, and you better help, because this could get ugly, right? I need your help. Please help me, God, because here I go. The greatest rock band in the history of music, U2, has a great song called Please. And there's a great line in it that says, please, please get up off your knees. And the call is there to don't just sit and do nothing, right, to get involved. And Nehemiah does that. He moves quickly. And then he says something profound at the end of the first chapter of Nehemiah. He hears the report, he prays, realizes he should do something. And then he makes, in fact, you may want to put this on your wall. You may want to put this on your phone to remind you. He says the most profound statement at the end of Nehemiah 1, verse 11. He says this, I was cupbearer to the king. Aren't you motivated? And aren't you like, yeah, wait, what? I wanted like, yes, I Hulk, smash, let's go, right? I wanted something like that, but I was cupbearer to the king. Well, he's actually telling us some things about himself. And the first is this. He tells us who he's not, right? He doesn't say, I'm the governor, I'm the president, I'm the mayor, I'm the leader, I'm the pastor, I'm the whatever. He doesn't say that. He's not that. His only job, that's it. His only job is to keep the Persian king happy. Here's your food, sir. Wait, let me try that, okay? All right, we're good. You can have it. That's what he does every day of his life. Can you imagine? Oh, wait, it's supper time? Hold on, let me. Okay, you're good, right? That's what he does. That's what he does. You think sometimes when you sit at your desk, you're like, whoa, this is just meaningless. Imagine doing that all day long, right? Good? Take it back, right? He's cupbearer to the king. Any food that comes to the king, he's trying before it gets there. Imagine on the day that you're like allergic to the meal. No, I'm allergic to fish. Oh, I got to try, and you get sick. But anyway, that'd be bad. I'm cupbearer to the king. He's telling you who he's not. Don't miss this. Our responsibility has nothing to do with our profession. Our responsibility has nothing to do with that. Just because you're not a pastor doesn't mean you're not responsible to for the people around you, right? That doesn't mean you're not responsible for the people in our community. We are responsible for engaging with a broken world. Not because it's in our job description, but because we're God's people. That's why. Because we're God's people. We're the church. We're the ambassadors. We're the representatives of Christ here right around us. And with this statement, I was cupbearer of the king, Nehemiah tells you, listen, you could sit there and sip water for the king all day, but you are responsible for the people and caring about the people around you. He also tells us something else about himself with this. Being cupbearer to the king, he also has certain privileges, right? He gets to interact with a very powerful person every day, right? He's implying that there are privileges that he could leverage with people who are hurting. Nehemiah, the cupbearer to the king, teaches us something incredible about what it means to be God's people. That there are times when what is happening in the world requires us to leverage whatever we have to help folks. You and I are called to leverage whatever status, whatever influence, resources, privilege, knowledge, connections, finances we have to reach those around us for the sake of those around us. Not because we're trying to be good people, hear this, but because we're God's people. Not because we're trying to prove how great we are, but because we are God's people. And when I hear him say, I was cupbearer of the king, I think of so many people I've met over my life who have heard say stuff like, I'm a teacher, but I lead teenagers, or I'm a lawyer, but I help out with babies in the nursery, or I'm a truck driver and I work with the 7th grade boys, or I'm a CEO and I just got back from Mission Serve. When I hear stuff like that, you know what I think? Man, they get it. They get it. They recognize who they're called by God to be. And the church is filled with people who know that their job is not their only responsibility, but the people around them are. People who are willing to leverage what they have for kids and for teenagers. So Nehemiah finds out what's going on in his hometown, and he risks, not only leverages what he has, but he risks everything he has. This could go very badly for Nehemiah. For him, remember, Artaxerxes is not a Jewish king. He is serving a foreign king. Artaxerxes could be like, no, and off with his head. He's done, right? This could be taken as an extreme sign of disloyalty for him to come before him. But he risks it for the people he loves. He risks his privilege. He risks his position. And he risks his power. You know why? Because people are worth it. Because people are worth it. You can't expect to rebuild or restore anything without having the potential to lose, without having the potential for it to cost you something. Because let's be honest, we all want preschoolers to have great starts, don't we? We all want to rescue kids in foster care. We all want churches to thrive. We want teenagers to have consistent mentors. We want to rid our cities of poverty and crime. We all want whatever's broken, to get restored. As long as it doesn't cost me personally. Right? I want all those things to happen. Most of the time, as long as it doesn't cost me personally. But we're in need of more Nehemiahs. People who are willing to risk, to leverage whatever they have to make things happen, to rebuild whatever is broken. And Nehemiah then goes to Jerusalem because he has to see it in person. And he demonstrates for us a powerful principle. That for us to lead, for us to be the people God's calling us to be, the people who have lasting influence on others, is that we have to go see for ourselves, right? And if you don't go see for yourself what's happening in the lives of kids and teenagers and families in our community, we're going to limit our effectiveness, right? We're not going to be the people of God that we're called to be in our community. He had to go to Jerusalem. He had to ride around the walls. He had to talk to the community leaders. He had to get involved. Before he could ever lead anybody anywhere, he had to be close to the situation. You know why? Because proximity always changes your perspective. It always does. Getting close to somebody or some situation always changes your perspective. The closer you get, the better you can see. When you have enough courage to go see for yourself, it's going to change how you lead, how you speak, and how you think. Guaranteed. Right, that will happen. Imagine what would happen if enough of us in this room decided to get close enough. Before we pass judgment, before we make a statement, before we offer solutions, before we vote for anything, just go see for yourself. If enough of us in this room would get close, man, how the atmosphere would begin to change. If enough of us would get close to people of a different color. If enough of us would get close to people who don't share our views. If enough of us would get close to people who are marginalized and living below the poverty line, and people who are hurting because of injustice, and people who are facing impossible odds, then maybe we get bothered enough to do something about it, right? And see, we love having a packed room. By the way, 9 o'clock, you look great this morning. We love having a room full of folks each week here. We do. And it's a great honor that you spend each Sunday morning with us here at Village. We love it. And we love that. We love that you show up. But success for us as Village is that those of us in this room are showing up in the lives of other people, right? Other people each week. And some of you might be wondering how. How do you start showing up? Well, I think for a lot of us, that probably happens. The best place to start is in the life of our kids and our teenagers. Because there is one thing we can all do. Maybe you're like, well, I can't sing, or I can't play, or I can't do this, or I can't do... One thing we can all do. Give every kid an adult who will show them what Jesus is like. Show them who Jesus is. Our community is full of kids who see brokenness everywhere they look. In their neighborhood, in their school, even in their families. So maybe for you and me, we could start acting like the church is the best chance they have to experience God's love from a consistent and caring adult. The best way we can start rebuilding our community, rebuilding our nation, rebuilding whatever's broken, is to provide every kid with their own personal superhero. Right? Oh, you got a Superman. Oh, you got a Green Lantern. Oh, you got a Batman, even though maybe he's a superhero, maybe he's not. You got one of those? That's great. You know how we're going to do that? We're going to Nick Fury the heck out of it. You nerds know what I'm talking about. So Nick Fury's this guy in the movies. It's Samuel L. Jackson, believe it or not. He wears an eye patch. He's kind of like a strange pirate version of Samuel L. Jackson. And he's the guy that brings together the Avengers, right? He recruits this super team. And that's what we want to do, to put together this group and then develop adults who show up in the lives of our kids. Because the more adults that get close and understand and care for kids and teenagers in our community, the more impact we're going to have on this community. Guarantee it. We need more folks that'll get close. So every kid is known by someone, because there is no substitute in a kid's life for a consistent leader. Friends, there's a generation, right, sitting in the wings, wondering how close we'll get, right? Wondering if we'll listen to them talk about Fortnite. Oh my gosh. Wondering if we'll listen to them talk about Minecraft. Wondering if we'll go watch their baseball games. Wondering if we'll take enough time to listen to what's going on in their life. Right? Wondering if we'll listen to their music. Hey, we were kids once too, and our parents were like, oh my gosh, what is that stuff? Right? They're watching to see how far the next generation is willing to go. They're watching to see how far we're willing to go. Are we willing to meet them where they are? And if we're not willing to get close to them, we're going to lose them. Somebody else will, right? Something else will. But you know what? There's hope. There's hope. By naming what's broken, by leveraging what we have, by getting close, we can see the brokenness for ourselves. We can change the way the next generation sees and encounters God. And next week, you want to be back for next week? It's going to be way better, I promise. You want to be back for that? We're going to talk about what it looks like to put this into action. We're going to talk about what it looks like to put it into action. And we're going to finish up the story of Nehemiah, how he rebuilds the wall, re-engages the faith of the folks. And we're going to talk about what it looks like here to engage with the next generation, so that they are known by consistent leaders in their lives. You're not going to want to miss it. And for those of you already superheroing, thank you. For already wearing a cape, thank you. Thank you for what you're doing in the lives of our students. If you're interested this morning, or even curious about what that's like, there's a card in your seat. We want you to fill that card out. And as we leave today, there are going to be some guest services folks sitting there to receive those cards. And if you hadn't taken up a cape yet, we got a cape ready for you, figuratively this morning. Not yet, literally, but we have a cape for you. We're actually in the form of a save the date. We're going to have a big event in August, a kickoff to our kids' year coming up, and we want you to be involved in that. Maybe you're serving already. Maybe you have one superhero cape and you're like, I really like another one. You're like, I like a green one or a blue one. And we'd love you to take up another one. We'll fill out that card and again, hand it to the guest services folks as you leave. Or maybe you're sitting here today and you're like, so that guy who was talking, like he didn't answer any of my questions. I need somebody that'll answer my questions. That's great. There'll be people out there in Village Kids shirts, they got the big V on them, that they would love to answer any questions that you would have. If you just head toward the superhero wall, check that out. They have all the answers to the questions that you may have. Man, there is no substitute in the life of a kid for a consistent leader. This summer we've been telling you to say yes to kids. What we're calling each other to do now is to provide each kid, each baby, each toddler, each kid, each middle schooler, each high schooler with their own personal superhero. All right, let's pray together.